Hey everyone, my next guest, James G. Matlock, joins us. He was with us before and had some technical issues. Now he's going to be with us by phone, but we're going to be talking about past lives and reincarnations, and that includes kids. So give me about 5 minutes to get things started, and off we go. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. Uh-oh. My camera. I lost my camera. What's going on? Hang on. Somewhere I lost my camera. What happened? Give me a second. Whoa, make sure. Hang on, let me go get sets. Hang on. Bear with me, we just lost the camera. I don't know why. Oh, man. Okay, let me try this. Some reason, let's try this one. Ignore that one. That one's a jerk. That camera's no bueno. It's going to be like that today, huh? All right, I'm disconnecting and I'm coming back in. Okay. Okay, that is just weird. Okay. Well, you're going to have to bear with me. I'm probably going to have to restart my computer, so just bear with me, okay? Let me do a quick restart and I'll be right back in. That falls into the category of I have no clue. Wow, that's all I can say about that. Good thing I didn't do it in the middle of the intro. Brad. Okay, there we are. Okay. Wow, okay. Again, that falls under the category of I have no clue. All of a sudden, my camera was gone. You could tell I was like flashing up there. Anyway, welcome to the show. I hope you're having a better day than I am right now. We got a great guest for you. He's been on before, James G. Matlock, and unfortunately, the last time he was on, because it was video on his end, there was some kind of drag on the video, and so the questions and answers were kind of, you could hear them, but you couldn't hear them, kind of thing. So I'm going to be calling him in a couple minutes here. My name is Charlotte, and I'll be your host for the evening. Hopefully, we don't lose our camera again. That was scary. Because I can tell you, the camera on this computer, if I was to go to the webcam on this computer, it's horrible. I don't know why this particular webcam is horrible, so I have to use an external webcam via USB. So who knows? You never know. But anyway, It's enough about my computer. Okay. I'm Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so, we hope. And I am also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of sunny, very sunny, Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state. If you have any paranormal issues, look me up. You can look me up on Facebook. Look me up at californiahaunts.org or look me up at californiahauntsradio.com and we'll get somebody out there. Okay. With 45 people, they're spread up and down the state so we can get to any city, any county, anywhere. All right. And also, if you're in Washington or Oregon or Hawaii or Nevada, we can get people out there as well. So we're all over the place. We're like those flies you can't get rid of. You keep slapping them. We're still here. Anyway, again, our guest had issues last week or last time he was on, or I guess it was like last month. God, time flies. And so I said that we would get him back on and use the phone this time, so it's going to be a phone interview. But we had a really good we had a really good talk with him, except that there was drag in the video, so we're not going to have that today. We hope. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get James on so we can get going. All right. So, again, if anybody has any suggestion for dialing music, I keep asking for dialing music, and I never let me get my volume up, and and I never get it. So if anybody has any suggestions for dialing music, that would be really cool. Let's get this show on the road, as they say, as my dad used to say. Seriously? Yes, call him. Okay, here we go. Okay. Get this set up.
Hello.
Hi, this is Charlotte from California Haunts Radio. How are you?
Oh, hi. I'm just fine.
Terrific. It's good to hear you. It's good to hear you again.
It was kind of awkward last time, wasn't it? Trying to do it that way. Well, I hope this is better. Are we live now? Or
we are live. Yes, sir. We're live, and it sounds really good. So I'll tell you that right now.
Okay, excellent. Yes, yeah. Last time, for listeners who, or have you already explained that what happened last time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just jump right into it then.
Okay. Tell me about you.
All right. Okay. Tell me about me. I'm my professional training is in anthropology, but I've been involved in parapsychology a bit longer than that. I was professionally involved in parapsychology before I went into anthropology. And my interest in reincarnation and also predated my involvement in anthropology. So I went into anthropology, with that, in mind, with that interest in place, and and so what that meant was, as I went through my anthropological studies and later, professionally active in anthropology, I had those parapsychological interests, and I had that interest in reincarnation, and that helped shape things. On the parapsychological side, I've worked at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York and at the Rhine Research Center in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm currently retired, but associated with the Parapsychology Foundation in New York. But the common thread to all of this is my interest in reincarnation.
Reincarnation is really interesting in that, I've seen TV shows, even I watch those shows, I've seen TV shows, especially quite a while back, like with KVIE, and I remember it. I don't know why KVIE would have something like this on, because I guess there was no other programs back then, because I was real little. But what impressed me about KVIE was that it was one of these programs about any scars you might have on your body or anything like that, or any pain in your back that's consistent. And how that could lead back to a past life. So right. In your research in this, have you found cases like that? I mean,
You mean with physical, with
Yes.
birthmarks and
Yes.
physical things? Oh, yes, definitely. That's a very important dimension in reincarnation. Uh, for some people, I mean, what they think of first is the past life memories, right?
Uh-huh.
And but cases don't always have past life memories. Now, in order to verify them, in order to identify the previous person, we almost always have to have those memories. But they include other things too, and behaviors that turn out once the previous person has been identified, child's behaviors or adults' behaviors, turn out to correspond to the person whose life was called. And it's the same way with the physical things. They may not be, you may not be sure,
Mm-hmm.
that this or that birthmark or this or that, other physical thing, illness. It could be internal illness, or many people know about physical resemblances, facial resemblances, or so forth, and those show up too. You can't be sure until you verify the previous life, but then once you have, and you can compare the present life with the remembered previous life, you see that these things line up.
I find it so fascinating because, I've got scars on my body. I have problems with my spine.
Right.
And whether those are related to a past life, I'm probably going to find out this week. I'm going to. Nancy Matz, medium Nancy Matz, is actually going to take me back to see what happened in my past life. So it's going to be interesting. It's the first time I'm ever having it done. And so, I just wonder, like I said, about the injuries that I have, and the different scars. So, I'll let everybody know, definitely. So you have a group on Facebook, right?
Yes, it's called Science of Reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. And what happens on that group? In that group?
Well, it's the subname is Experiences in Research. So we invite people to come in and relate their experiences, ones that they've had themselves, or many people talk about their children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who have said odd things, and and sometimes it's the cases with both the children and adults are there's enough detail to them that we can actually either they have already figured out who whose life is being remembered, or we can help them do that.
Are you finding it more frequent? Because I know they have the TV shows on about that. Do you find as you're doing this on Facebook that people are coming forward more and more?
I'm not sure that I've had the group since 2014, so
Okay.
I've had it for a while. And I'm not sure that over that time, maybe more people are coming forward. But over the longer time, I would say that since I've been involved in this area for about 40 years now, so that's quite a while.
Yeah.
And over that time, over that length of time, I would say very definitely people are more comfortable in talking about these things now.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like with paranormal. At first with ghost hunting, nobody wanted to say anything because they figured they'd be thought, as a nut job. But now that all this has come out with the TV shows, everybody and their brother wants to tell you they've got a ghost in their house. It's kind of funny.
I know it is. I think another thing with this reincarnation, I'm not sure so much about the ghosts.
Right.
I think there's a better number with the reincarnation. I think what's really made a difference is social media. And it's not just Facebook, but also Twitter, Reddit, all of them. And people who set up groups now with chat groups where people go and share these stories. I think it's just become much easier now to share these experiences. And so as people hear and read about others' experiences, they resonate with their own, right?
Right.
And then they'll come in and say, oh, my child said this or that, or I had this or that experience, right? And so it sort of snowballs that way. People become more comfortable talking about it as they realize they're not unique.
In your research in the last 40 years, do you see any common things that, that I'm not saying connect the cases, but things that are common between the cases,
Yeah, very definitely. I mean, there are a set of patterns. I mean, that's why, you can classify these cases together as a type. I mean, Stevenson's term for it was cases of the reincarnation type. He was trying, he was writing in an earlier phase. He sort of pioneered the serious study of this, so he had to be a little bit careful with his terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he called them reincarnation type. It's just to say, as if to say, this is what they suggest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they do. I mean, they have these common denominators, and there are a whole bunch of them. I mean, one of them is that they do have the past life memories and the behaviors and the physical things. Okay. Another is that if children are going to start talking about these things, they start very early, by ages 2 or 3. And then many children will forget them. Some don't say much or anything. They'll just say maybe one thing or a few things, and it doesn't really lead to anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Others will have more extensive memories, and they'll talk about them over a period of years. But then, with many children, they begin to fade. The memories begin to fade by middle or late childhood. So they start very early, but then by middle or late childhood, they begin to fade.
I wonder.
And they don't,
Well, I wonder if the mind works with this like it does with psychic abilities. Because everybody's born with these abilities, and some kids, show them stronger than others. But then after a certain amount of time, when they're kids, they start to fade out. So I wonder if it might be the same part of the brain.
Right. I don't think we know enough yet to say it's the same part of the brain, but I think the common denominator there is developmental variables.
Okay.
I think as we grow up, our brains, they change, right? We know that. And they get, one of the things that they do is become more dominant over our consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, it is just easier for children to have these experiences of seeing apparitions or, of remembering past lives or whatever, or having ESP experiences, whatever it is. It's just easier for kids because their brain hasn't yet gotten full control of their consciousness.
What types of things do these kids remember from their past lives?
All sorts of things. One of the most common things is how they died. But not all children remember that. They tend to remember things that are emotionally significant, or, it's the same sorts of things that we remember about our present lives, right? The same sorts of things. But the things that we remember are the things that are the most emotionally salient to us, right? The most meaningful to us. And it's the same thing with these kids.
Well, what I find frightening, because I've done research into some of these cases, is that they tend to remember their death pretty clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's just like with memory of the present life. I mean, we all make mistakes sometimes in what we remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think we remember things and it didn't happen quite that way and whatever. And it's the same with these kids. I mean, they will make mistakes. I mean, and one of the things that they often make mistakes about is their deaths. And if you think about that, it shouldn't be all that surprising. Deaths, particularly violent deaths, they're very sudden very often, right?
Mm-hmm.
They surprise you, and so both because it was very sudden and surprising, and because there was no time for the memory to consolidate, right? It shouldn't really be that surprising that they make mistakes about the things. Either that they remember them or that they make mistakes about them. Neither should be surprising.
You think it could be something similar? I know there's been no studies on it, but kind of like when, say, something traumatic happens to somebody, and then they don't remember the details, or they don't remember it because their mind automatically puts up a block on it.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's the same thing with PTSD. I mean, if something very, very traumatic happens to you, you block it out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just natural. It's a normal thing. It's a psychic defense, right?
Right.
It's trying to help you. And I think it's the same thing with the past life memory. I think, one common question is, why don't we remember more about our previous lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the kids who do remember, why don't they remember more? I think it's simply that. I think it's a psychological block. And I think that the block is there to help us, right?
Right.
Because a lot of these things that they remember are not very nice. I mean, it's not very pleasant to remember how you died, for heaven's sakes, and other traumatic things. It's really not very pleasant to recall all of that. And and the children who do recall them, and and there are people who remember things into their adult years, or recall things in adulthood for the first time. And it's often traumatic things, and they're not easy to deal with. And so, people say, "Oh, I want to have past life memories and so forth," and why can't I remember this or that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, count yourself blessed that you don't, is my feeling. And because and the people who have strong memories and have to deal with them will tell you that. I mean, it's not a blessing to have these memories at all.
I mean, if I was a parent, I'm not a parent, but if I was a parent, your kid's sitting there coloring, and then all of a sudden you notice that there's some real yuck. I mean, I gotta call it yucky, but I mean scary pictures this kid's coloring. Like, for instance,
Right.
the little boy that had been the fighter pilot that was shot down.
Right.
And he's drawing pictures of being shot down and all this. I mean, that would just boom, set something off in your brain.
Right, it shakes you up, doesn't it? I mean, you wonder, why are they drawing these things? Now, that kid, he had nightmares, which is something else you get with these cases, the children's cases particularly, night terrors and nightmares, and you just have to deal with those, And it's not easy for the kids. It's even harder for the parents, because the kids often don't remember these things on waking. The parents have to observe them, And so the children, it's difficult for them while they're dreaming, but then when they wake up, it's sort of gone. The parents remember it, and they have to deal with it. Other times, the kids do remember on waking, and that's the characteristic of nightmares, and it's also a characteristic of post-traumatic nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the kids' nightmares that relate to previous lives, previous deaths, and so forth, the traumatic ones, they really do resemble, post-traumatic disorder type dreams and nightmares, except that the traumatic event occurred not in their present life, but in their previous life.
Fascinating. And my other thought is too, you hear about these kids, and I'm not going to compare anybody, but like these serial killers that come up.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are drawing pictures like this, and it makes you wonder whether or not something had happened to them now with all this information out about past lives. It makes you wonder if something happened to them in their past life.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and something else which is said a lot, pediatricians will say all the time to these parents, "Oh, many children have night terrors, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
natural; it'll pass in a while." They never ask, why do so many children have night terrors? Maybe the reason that so many children have night terrors is like this kid, like James Leininger. They were remembering something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why night terrors are so common. Yeah. So when we finally get to the point where we accept reincarnation and understand it, there are a lot of things which we will see differently, I think.
Was it James? Was it James or another kid who, when they took him to the 4th of July, he couldn't handle it?
Yeah, I think that may have been Carol Bowman's son you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he remembered. I think the fireworks reminded him of guns going off, and he started having memories spontaneously. And what I'm interested in is spontaneous memories, not regression memories.
Mm-hmm.
To clarify that. But anyway, he started having these spontaneous memories of having died in the Civil War.
That's crazy. I don't know what would
Yeah.
I would do. I mean, I guess obviously you'd have to seek help, somehow find some kind of help for the child, because I mean,
Yeah.
how do you respond to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is what, so Carol Bowman had, she had this child, she got interested in it, and as a result, then she went and became a clinician.
Mm-hmm.
She went and became a therapist to help people, to help people with these things. And she wrote a couple of books about it to help parents, because she realized, that these, having raised a child that had these memories, she realized there was a need for this sort of support, and she's been very, very helpful to people. I've heard this often. People find her books very, very helpful.
Are there any particular stories you've seen in your Facebook group that stand out?
Any stories that stand out? There's just been so many, but I think the one that stands out to me the most is a case that I'm investigating now. We're still working on, haven't written up yet, haven't finished investigating yet, but it's an interesting one because it's of an American boy. It was an American teenager who was killed in a tornado in Alabama. And then a few years later, a British child started having memories of having died in a tornado. And he would remember various names, like the name Wendy and various other things. His memories were really quite detailed. Eventually, and his mother, unfortunately, she didn't write all this down at this point, but she got intrigued by it, and as it went on, she began to wonder, could these, even like many parents, at first they just dismissed it, right?
Right.
But as it went on and there was more and more detail to this, it became intrigued by it. And so she began to wonder if this was a past life memory. So he talked about a tornado. So she went to the internet and started looking for tornadoes in the United States. And she thought she identified one that was a different tornado. But anyway, she came to my Facebook group, and talked about this. Wrote about her son who was having these memories. And what she wrote reminded another member of something that she had heard in a support group. And she went to the mother of this teenage boy who had died in the tornado and said, "Look, you have to see this. This reminds me of your son." And so the mother, who was not yet a member of my group, joined the group, looked at this and said, "Yeah, this sounds exactly like what happened to my son." So we solved, this is the term we use when we identify the previous person, we solved this case through my group.
That's interesting. And so, like you say, you're working on the case right now, right?
Yeah, I'm working on writing this up. We're about finished with the interviewing the mother. I'm having help with this from a colleague in the UK because I can't get over there, and we've been delayed by COVID. It's thrown such a monkey wrench and everything. But we're about done with that, and then I'll go to the mother in Georgia. I'm sorry, I said Alabama earlier, but northern Georgia. I'll go to her and do more, with comparing the memories. We have the basic thing now down, but there's a lot more, and I've been waiting to finalize the record from the kid's side before I go back, and he's mentioned the name Wendy. Wendy turned out to be his previous mother's name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's like so many of these cases, it's like wow after wow after wow after wow. And he also, this British kid had a birthmark, and the birthmark turned out for an injury to the boy who died. He was picked up by the tornado. He was in a mobile home, and the tornado hit the mobile home. He was thrown around and into a tree, and he was injured on the tree. And the place that he was injured in the tree is the place where the kid has the birthmark.
Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And, this is why I stayed with it for 40 years. Why Stevenson stayed with it for 40 years. Because you run across case after case after case after like this. And it just, they're really, after a while, or even right at the beginning, there's no other way to explain this stuff, right? And so, and it's so important. Right?
Right.
It's such an important thing. And so yeah, I mean, so that's that's part of my story too. That's why I've stayed with this and what Stevenson did, because it's there just isn't any other way, and it's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely.
So once you put a case like this together, do you work with the family afterwards to help, finish off getting the answers for the kid, or how's that work?
That's a really good question. I'm not trained as a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a clinician, and so my role is as an investigator. So those of us who investigate these cases learn very quickly that we have to be sensitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be supportive, but we also have to remember that we're not trained as therapists, so we have to keep those limits in mind. There are things that we need to be supportive of the families, but at the same time, we cannot overstep. We just can't, ethically do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my role really stops in documenting it. Right. I mean,
Right.
That's my role, is to document it and then confirm it. Right. With the other side, with the previous. On the previous side, and do what I can to show that this is a real case, and then if more is needed beyond that, help people find those who can help them beyond what I'm able to do.
Absolutely. And the years that you've been doing this, how many cases do you think you've looked into?
Well, for the first many years, I didn't get into the cases as much as into the literature. So for the first long period, I was really more of an analyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote plenty. I studied plenty. I was very, very on top of the literature. It was only really after I retired, I guess, that I found time, to get into this, to get into the case studies. Another thing is, so I've written 2 books. My first book was co-authored with Erlander Harrelson, who was he unfortunately died a couple of years ago of cancer, but he was a very well-known investigator of these things. In fact, also of apparitions and hauntings and all of that, of paranormal stuff. He was Icelandic. He was at the University of Iceland. But he was also a friend of Stevenson's and trained by Stevenson on the reincarnation stuff. And when he got ready, and his papers he published in journals, but then when he got ready to compile them in a book, he asked me to co-author it with him. Because we were friends. We had known each other for many years, and he knew I knew my stuff, right? So he asked me to co-author with him to give sort of a larger context point of view, because he knew his cases, right? He knew the cases that he had worked with, primarily in Sri Lanka and in Lebanon among the Druze people, and in his native Iceland. But when you focus on the cases like that, you don't necessarily know the whole literature, in the same depth as somebody who's focusing on the literature like I was. So he brought me in to do that. And I used that as an opportunity then to start getting into cases to supplement what I was saying. So, all of the cases that I've written about in that book, or in my other book, or am now investigating are ones that I've learned about actually on Facebook through my group. So it's been very important in that way too. I didn't start the group with the view of learning about cases, but I started it with the idea of educating people about this stuff, because and that's why I'm very pleased to be invited to come on to shows like this, because many people don't realize how much of this research has been done, for how long it's been done, how good it is, and what the findings are. And I think it's so important to get this out.
Oh, go ahead.
Anyway, I want to answer your question, how many? So I would say between 1 and 2 dozen at this point have I investigated. So not as many as some other people, not as many as Stevenson, who investigated hundreds,
Right. Now, another question I have is, we talked earlier about, kids that have these experiences, and then, like you say, as they get older, things get in the way, and they don't have them anymore. But what about adults? Is it because, is there some kind of trigger in their adult life that brings all that back?
Yeah. Yes. Triggers are very important, particularly with adult memories. And one of the studies that I did some years ago, when I was looking at age, the age of the person who, when they first had memories, whether as in relation to how whether the memories just came up spontaneously or they needed to be triggered by something, because I had noticed in reading these cases that there seemed to be that correlation, that the older the children became, the more they needed some sort of a trigger to help them. Coming back to the developmental thing I mentioned earlier, makes sense, right? And so I did that study, and I found a statistically significant relationship there. So yes, the older a person is, the more in need of some sort of triggers or cues to their memories. And these, but again, this is something that's very similar to present life memory, right? Many times the things we remember are things that are cued, right, or triggered by something associative.
Do older people handle it differently than children do?
Handle it differently. Yeah, I think so, because with the kids, the kids are growing. They don't really know what to make of it yet. It's just totally natural for them, and then they sort of resolve. The cases sort of resolve, right? And then they forget. And they forget, fairly early in life, and don't always remember later on in life what they remembered when they were young. And so they put it behind them. Whereas with adults, that's not possible. So when adults start remembering these things, they have to resolve them on their own, right? They have to resolve them in adulthood. It doesn't get resolved for them. And that makes it more difficult sometimes for adults. Also, because the things that they tend to remember tend to be of the more traumatic nature. With kids, I haven't mentioned this, but my daughter is one of these kids. And in 3, she began to have these memories. Well, one of her memories was of drinking hot chocolate and looking out and watching snowfall. Right? Something very trivial and innocuous, but emotionally meaningful. And it's the type of thing that we can have memories of our own lives that'll float into our minds, right? That for one reason or another, it was meaningful to us. But with adults, it's usually not that sort of meaningless, meaningful thing, right? It's of a more it's of a more emotionally powerful thing, and the more emotionally powerful something is, the more difficult it is to deal with. And with adults in particular, the things that are remembered seem to be things that need psychological resolution.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas with kids, the things that are remembered, yeah, they also are important. They also have an unfinished business sort of quality to them. But they can be more like remembering children. If you remember, if you're a girl, you remember leaving young children behind when you died young, things like that, right?
Right.
And so it's it's meaningful and emotionally significant in a way, but not the same as having to deal with memories of how you died or another trauma.
Now, another question I have is, when an adult starts to have these visions, how do they come? I mean, do they come in dreams, or is it something that, maybe they're walking down the street, they see somebody they think they recognize, or how's that work?
It can happen both ways. There are, but very often with adults, it's in dreams or in altered states. Sometimes in meditations. Sometimes people say on the verge of going to sleep, or waking up, before the brain is fully engaged, they'll have these images, things like that. And that's a good point, because with children there can also be dreams. They're often these nightmares, and the children's memories often come in the waking state. Whereas with adults, it's less often nightmares, but more often the dreams come, the memories come in dreams and not in the waking state. But they can also be triggered by seeing somebody or seeing a place, and you hear from adults very often, having run into this person and feeling that they knew this person before, just having that strong sense.
See, this is also interesting to me, and it's something I can wrap my head around, because people, have these intuition things going on all the time, where they'll be out at a store or someplace and they'll run into someone that they swear beyond swear that they recognize,
exactly.
But they can't place them.
Yeah, and maybe not recognize visually, but recognize emotionally. They just have the sense, I know this person, I knew this person before, we had shared a life, and the other person may feel the same way,
Do you think that they can feel an instant connection with somebody?
I'm sorry, I missed. Do I feel like what?
Did you think that they have the ability to feel like when they see that other, like you just said, when they see that other person, that they can feel an instant connection with them?
Yeah, I think they can. I mean, I think the connections that they feel really are real. I mean, and it shouldn't. Again, it's not something that should surprise us, really. If, as I believe, these memories are contained in our subconscious minds, right? I mean, that's where I think they are. I mean, they're not pulled from the Akashic records or something like that. They're inside us, right? And it's our unconscious is holding on to them. But that also means that our unconscious can respond, right? That's where the emotion comes from, the response comes from. And so if you meet somebody like that, you can, there's that stimulus there to the unconscious, and so you respond to it in that way. But there's another dimension to this too, and that's a psychic dimension. Because we know from studies of psychic connections, among living people, right, that they're very common among people who know each other, or are intimate with each other, or in families, right? I mean, these are the most common sorts of things. And so it's not really that surprising then that that connection would continue, right, across lives.
Absolutely. Do you think that, this is my other thought that I had too, are the past life dreams or the past life thoughts of adults different from children? Because I mean, like the little boy who was a fighter pilot. I mean, adults have similar past lives, right? That come up.
Right. I'm sorry. We started off with a good connection, but I'm beginning to get some echo, and I didn't quite understand the difference between your question here and the previous one.
Okay, so my question here is that, like the little boy that was having dreams of the airplane going down and whatnot. Do adults have similar dreams like that?
I see. Yeah. Well, Yeah, no, not necessarily. I mean, adult dreams can be different. I mean, but they can,
Mm-hmm.
they can have those, they can have dreams like that. Um, there was a, I think this was a child. I'm trying to think of an adult dream that I can give you an example of. I'm only thinking of ones that began in childhood and were sort of traumatic things. Um, there was there's somebody called Frederick Lenz who in the 70s got interested in these memories among adults, and he wrote the first book on adult past life memories, and most of them were in dreams. But they weren't of these sorts of nightmarish dreams.
Mm-hmm.
They were of other events. Um, so, yeah, I mean, adults can have these sorts of nightmarish dreams, but the adult dreams tend not to be as nightmarish as kids' dreams are.
Okay. And that.
Go
ahead.
And I think that's true in general. I mean, again, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a dream researcher either. But my feeling is that nightmares are something that occur in childhood, and adults don't have nightmares so much, do we?
I don't think so. I don't have a lot of them. I think it depends how stressful our lives are. Maybe.
So, it sort of parallels that, which again, sort of goes back to sort of the developmental thing.
And maybe it has to do with stress too, because I know when I have them, I'm usually stressed. So maybe it's just the stress levels. My other thought now we'll go down along that rabbit hole here. Reincarnation in that, the whole thing with people that you know in your current life you knew before, and every time you're reborn, you're with the same group of people. Do you believe that, or have you found that?
No, it's not. It's not what I believe, but what the cases show.
Okay.
And the cases don't show that. I mean, that's often said that we reincarnate with the same group of people and so forth, but no, we don't see that all that often. What we do see, and I think this is what maybe gives rise to that, what we do see is that most often the reincarnation is in the same geographical region or the same culture. In Asia, it's often, not very far from where a person died. In the United States, where we have so much a larger country, it's usually in the United States again, but not so close by, unless it's in the same family. Right. We haven't talked about family cases, but we can, and because that's an important subset of all this.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the cultural link what we seem to come back to is into our comfort zones, right? Mm-hmm. And so we seem to come back most often. There are exceptions, don't get me wrong about that. There are definitely exceptions. It's sort of inter-ethnic cases, interracial cases, this type of thing. But most often we come back seemingly in the same culture, the same region, the same ethnic group.
Okay. Well,
and I think what that means, if we all do this repeatedly, then we're bound to run into each other again.
Sure, I mean that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so I don't think that it's soul groups, right, that are reincarnating again and again together. I think it's just that there is this tendency to come back, in the same sort of area, in the same sort of group, which causes us to run into each other again.
Okay, all right, that makes super a lot of sense. And you mentioned family, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's very important to get into this, is the family, because particularly in the West, the cases that are solved, that is, that we've been able to identify the past life, are very often family cases. Now, one of the reasons why this tornado case I was talking about is important is it is not a family case. In fact, it's what we call an international case, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we were able to solve it. But many cases in the West have family connections or acquaintance connections. And we see those elsewhere too, but for some reason in Asia, they're less common. So like in India, we have more cases from India than any other country, and only 12% of them are family cases. So it just varies. I mean, it's interesting to see these variations and cultural variations, and although we see some variations from one country to the next, particularly from one religion to the next, let's say Hinduism versus Buddhism, we see differences. But the strongest differences and the most pronounced ones are from Asia as a group to Western cultures as a group. And one of the differences is in the percentage of family cases. Another very interesting difference between Asia and the West is in the length of time it takes to come back.
Okay.
In Asia, it tends to be very short. In fact, in Stevenson's collection, which is mostly Asian, the median length was only 15 months. So there were many cases that are very short, and in India in particular, less than 9 months in length. Whereas in the West, the median, particularly for stranger cases, is you have to count in decades. For the United States, it's like 25 to 30 years. So there's a real difference there.
I wonder why.
Yeah, it is. We don't know. We still don't know yet. I mean, there are a couple of ideas here. One, it may be that the population density is so much greater in Asia that there's just more opportunity to come back. Families are bigger, and so but again, we don't see so many family returns in Asia. So, but there is a greater population density, and so there's more possibility to come back more quickly. That could be a factor. Another one that I think is important is that in the West we have this idea that we're going to meet our loved ones when we die, right? And vice versa. They have the idea that they're going to be there to meet us when we die. And that may cause people to hold on longer before reincarnating.
That's a possibility. I mean,
we have to think of all these possibilities. And the reason why the second one really is a serious possibility is that we see all sorts of things during the intermission that suggest that consciousness continues during that period. I mean, when we die, our bodies are what die. Our bodies are what die. Our consciousness doesn't die. Our consciousness just continues. All right, and so we continue to be able to think. We continue to be able to act psychokinetically. We continue to be able to interact with people through ESP, right? Through mediums, or this is what apparitions and ghosts are, right? I mean, that there's this psychic thing here. So the dead are able to influence the material world. They're able to communicate with the living, but through ESP, through PK, psychically. And and so if consciousness continues on after death, it makes sense to me that what continues is our thought processes, our beliefs that we have in life, right? I mean, the transition to death is simply a transition. That's all it is, And so we don't suddenly become different people when we die. We don't suddenly become omniscient. The cases suggest. I know people talk about it that way sometimes, but when we look at these cases, it's not what we see. We don't suddenly become all knowing when we die. We don't suddenly see all of our past lives when we die. We don't suddenly understand everything when we die, and and we don't plan our next lives either. from what we see in these cases. But there's enough going on that it does seem to me that we could have this control, enough control to hold on and wait for our loved ones, our children, to see our children again, to see our spouses again in particular. And so, that just makes sense to me. That one of the reasons that the intermission period is so much longer in the West is simply that, because it's a belief that's very strong in Western culture you do not find in Asia.
Okay. Well, that was another question I had, and I think you kind of answered it about choosing what family we go back to in the next life. Because I was wondering if in your studies, do we get a choice, or do we just choose whatever hardships we want to face, like it shows in some of the movies, and then they send us to wherever.
Yeah, well, I mean, that the very fact that there are family cases, and so many of them, suggests that yeah, we do have a choice, right? I mean, that can't be by accident that we come back in the same family, or that we, even less, that we come back to a friend, right? And so there has to be that element of choice, which means control to it. On the other hand, when we look at the cases, and in about 20%, I mean, this is something else that surprises people. In about 20% of these cases, which have been verified, children remember things during this intermission period. So it's not that uncommon to remember things, right? And some of the things that they remember actually occurred. I mean, they actually saw, right, clairvoyantly, and they actually occurred. They also talk about seeing their parents. The boy James Leininger, the one with the fighter pilot, he told his parents, well, he had seen them in Hawaii. Now he was born in San Francisco,
right?
But it turned out his parents had actually gone to Hawaii for their 5th wedding anniversary. He said he had seen them in a pink hotel. They had stayed at a pink hotel. He said he had seen them dining on the beach. They had dined on the beach there last night. And he's not the only one, to say things like this that are true. And so it does seem like he really did see them. Now, he wasn't conceived then. He wasn't conceived until they got back to San Francisco, but he was conceived in San Francisco not long after. So the suggestion is he met them then, he saw them then, he became attached to them then, and he followed them back until it was possible for him to reincarnate.
Wow, you just totally blew me away with that one. I'll tell you. That's something.
Yeah, but listen. I'll say this. This is even wilder. But I think your listeners are already enough into this that it's not it will impress them, but not scare them. There are cases where it's even more than that, even more than a choice, where they actually are able to bring about their conception. I mean, there are cases where the vasectomies are overcome, or tube ligations are overcome to bring about pregnancies. And I had these in another case that I studied, and I wrote about it in my other book, Signs of Reincarnation, the same as my Facebook group, Signs of Reincarnation, for those who want to look at it. And it's another very interesting case, because it was an Oklahoma girl who recalled dying in New Orleans, at the New Orleans airport. And her father had a vasectomy. They weren't expecting another child. But what seems to have, even though this is a stranger case, one of the things that she remembered about the intermission was meeting her mother's mother, right? This is her present mother's mother, right?
Right.
Who died 10 years before she was born, after this was a 25-year intermission, right? So the mother died between the time that the girl died in the previous life and then she was reborn in this life, right?
Right.
And the only link that we can find between the two lives is her seeing the mother, meeting the mother during the intermission.
Wow.
But she described the mother accurately, and she said that the mother liked to play with them. Well, the mother during life one of the things she'd enjoyed doing was playing with children. So it was like she was carrying forward her behavior, right?
Right.
So that's the link. And if that was the link here, that's why she was determined to go to this family, even though the father had already had this vasectomy. But she made it happen.
That's insane. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so the more you look into this stuff, and we're talking about patterns. I mean, that's not the only case like that. There are others. There are many others. And so when you start seeing these patterns and you start really studying this stuff, and you see these types of weird things again and again and again and again, it just gets to the point where there isn't any other way to explain it. There's no other way.
What do you think? And I know we talked about common threads earlier, but like you say, there's no other way to explain this stuff. Have people, when they get on the Facebook page, because I still haven't had a chance to go over there yet, are they very open about the stuff, or are they kind of guarded when they first start, talking about this, or how?
It varies. Some people have become comfortable enough that they don't have any problem, and they come out with it. Maybe they've talked about it elsewhere. Other people say, this is the first time I've talked about this, but I feel comfortable doing it here, right? So it varies, and then there'll be other people who, are more resistant or doubtful. We don't have too many out and out skeptics, but there are some people who need to catch up, right? They just need to be aware of how common this stuff is, to get comfortable with it. So we have a range of different things there.
Do you find that the more they're on the page, because obviously they're saying other people's accounts of what's going on with them, so the longer they're on there, the more open they get?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so, simply because the longer they're on, the more of these stories they see. And as they begin to see, indeed, I'm not alone. Indeed, my kid's not alone. And as they begin to see the patterns, that there are really real similarities across all these cases, then that resistance begins to break down, and I'm not sure what's going on here begins to soften a little bit. Yeah. So I think the longer that people stay with this, and more they read about these things, and this is why I think social media has been important in making it easier for people to talk about this, because we're not the only group, right? We're not the only group that allows people to talk about these things. There are many now, and the difference in ours is that we'll bring it back to the research, right? We'll talk about it in relation to the research. But there are many of these other groups where people can talk about these things. And so as they do, and as they see others talk about them, they just become more comfortable with sharing.
Absolutely. What do you have to say to people who think that they might be having flashbacks to this stuff?
Don't put yourself down. Maybe, my feeling is that if the flashback sort of comes spontaneously, we should give it the benefit of the doubt. And even if there's not enough to it to be able to verify it, we should not dismiss it, right? Because we can see it as on the continuum with other cases that are better developed and that can be verified, right? So we can see now if people come in with, and sometimes this happens, people come in with things that just do not seem right, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see immediately, this does not feel right. This does not sound right, right? I mean, this is something we should not, embrace. But then there are many other things, even if they're not evidential, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's no way that they can be because it's just too vague. We can see that they have enough of the common indicators that they probably are real, even if they're not well enough developed to verify. But the other thing, which I always have to caution people on, is that unless we can verify them, we can't be sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's another question I just had. I was thinking back to the kid, to the little boy who was the fighter pilot. With kids now, to try and get information out of children must be difficult because if the parents want to verify what's going on, they at least have to get a name.
Yeah, I think I went through this with my daughter. They're two, we have to be parents first, right? The kids come first. And as parents, even if we have an interest, a research interest like me, or simply an interest in knowing the truth of this, the kids have to come first. And so we have to let them go at their own pace and let them tell us what they want to tell us. And if they're not prepared to tell us more, or if they just don't remember more, then we're not going to get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't press them. The other reason why we shouldn't ask them a lot of questions and try to bring things out is that we may encourage things that need to stay quiet, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the kids want to bring these memories out, it means that the memories are ready to come out, right? They want to be expressed for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And let them be expressed. Don't put them down. Listen to them. Value them, right? Don't make them feel like they're wrong, or that these are just fantasies. No, take them seriously. And if they want to tell you, I remember this or that. I remember putting you to bed. I remember feeding you, whatever. Don't dismiss it, right?
Right.
Maybe they were your grandfather, whatever. So, yeah, but I also caution people against not trying to draw things out the way that you would want if you were a researcher, or you want to verify it, because you don't want the child to become mired in those old memories, right?
Right.
Children have to grow up to live in the present lives, right?
Right.
You don't want them living in their past lives. So if the past life memories are there, yes, value them, allow them to talk about them, all that. And if they say enough that you can actually verify it, yeah, that's great. I think it's wrong to try to bring out these things just for the point of verification, because that can end up hurting the child.
Absolutely. Wow, this hour blew by. This was fantastic. We'd love to have you on again at some point to talk more about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I would love to come back. This is, we can go on. We've talked for a long time now, but I think everybody can sense that there's a whole lot more we could talk about.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, no, if you want me back at some point, I'm more than happy to do that. Just let me know.
So what's next for you?
Yeah, and so thank you for. I know your show is mainly about ghosts and hauntings.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for enlarging it enough to be about reincarnation. And I'm sure your listeners, your viewers and listeners will be they'll find this very interesting too. So, yeah, I'm more than happy to return.
Absolutely. So what's next for you, sir?
Oh, what's next? I just continue with my writing, my research and writing, and I'm 68, so I'm not old, but I'm not young now either. And what I want to do with the rest of my life is probably just stay with reincarnation.
There you go.
Just stay with it as much as I can. Researching cases and writing about cases and all that. So in one way or another, this is what I'll be continuing to do.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful. And we'll get you back on here because you're fascinating to talk to.
Okay, absolutely. It's been great talking to you.
All right. Have a good evening, sir.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right. So that was very interesting. I learned so much about reincarnation and stuff. It's a pity the last show didn't work out with him, but I want to thank you guys for being so patient the first 5-10 minutes of the show when I went off air, camera-wise. Maybe the ghost. I don't know. Anyway, if you're watching from YouTube, there's a little guy down in the corner, ghost, with a Sherlock Holmes hat and a magnifying glass on his head. I'd be really appreciated if you click on that and subscribe to our shows because we have a lot of shows over there of different topics and whatnot that you can check out. Okay, because we don't always cover paranormal stuff. So I think there's something for everybody. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated it, share it with 5 of your friends. Tomorrow, make a note of this, guys. We're going to be on at 3 p.m. Pacific. Our guest, and I hope I don't blow this guy's last name, Garnet Schulhauser, will be with us tomorrow. And Mr. Schulhauser, during his lifetime, met up with his spirit guide. And he had multiple meetings with his spirit guide, and he was able to ask his spirit guide about the other side and how it works. So it's going to be an interesting interview tomorrow, and he's written a few books about that as well. Also, if you're interested in learning some psychic development and you think you might be psychical ready, or maybe you want to try and see if you have psychic abilities, join me on Saturday at 11 a.m. for a psychic development class level 1. And in that class, I test your abilities. And one thing that happens is that we have a couple exercises that we do. And by the end of the class, you're going to more than likely see an improvement. But I do teach you how to go out of body and go visit your spirit library and your spirit animal and your spirit object and your spirit health person, health spirit, so that you can kind of work on your health, things like that. But it also teaches you how to open that psychic door or that spiritual door and close it, because sometimes when you open the door or even a crack, not everything nice comes through, and this teaches you how to shut the door. I also teach protection techniques during the class. So if you're interested in something like that, join me Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific. And we'll probably be doing it on StreamYard is what it looks like. And we won't be going live. And there's a way to do StreamYard just like you do Zoom, only only you do it with StreamYard. We did it last weekend. But I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate you guys coming to watch, and I hope you enjoyed tonight as well as I did. And again, I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific to talk to our next guest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this gentleman's information with you guys so you know where to find him and his 2 books and all that good stuff. And then I'm going to sign off tonight. So here we go. And without further ado, here's his information. Website, jamesgmatlock.com. And one of the books is Signs of Reincarnation. And I Saw a Light and Came Here. And books available at Amazon.com. And please be sure to visit the radio website at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. All these shows are there, plus the archives going back to almost 2 years, and some of the Blog Talk radio shows that we did for 5 years are over there as well. And if you're interested in paranormal needs, CaliforniaHaunts.org, that's the place to be. All right. Also, fly just flew across. That is not paranormal. Also, you see that ticker running along the bottom? well, we've got expenses here at California Haunts Radio. The paranormal group operates as a nonprofit. So the only person paying the bills is me. And if you can help me out a little bit, to keep this thing going as we expand and expand and expand, I would really appreciate it. You can do that at paypal.me/California Haunts or Venmo, just type in California Haunts. Again, thank you guys for coming. I'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific. Have a good one.